Hi, I'm Snez, personal trainer, healthy lifestyle coach, and your guide to feeling your best. This podcast is a segment from my weekly radio show, Wellbeing Wednesdays, broadcast live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. It's all about sharing real, practical tips to help you move more, eat better, and live healthier without the overwhelm. Let's dive in, shall we? Coming up next, I'm going to share some information that I only discovered just in this last week. And it has been really interesting information and something that I do want to share with you because it's all about gut health. And I tend to know a fair bit about gut health, but this was new and I just thought, wow, this is really important and really interesting to note. So with bacteria in our gut, we have two main types of gut bacteria. First, they're firmicutes and bacteroidetes. Now, with the firmicutes, they are our bad bacteria, or what we know as our bad bacteria. And up until this point last week, I was referring to gut bacteria as either good or bad bacteria. But now I see they have names and they have some very specific functions that I wasn't really aware of. So firmicutes are often linked to weight gain, which was so interesting to hear. They're very efficient at extracting energy from food, which basically mean they help your body to absorb more calories, even from the same meal as someone else that may have less firmicutes or bad bacteria. And if you have more firmicutes, your body tends to store more fat, which I thought was absolutely fascinating because I've been working with people, helping them to lead a healthier and a more active lifestyle for many, many, many years. But have also helping people to lose body fat and increase their wellness by being at a healthier weight. And this was some information that I didn't know. And I remember thinking at one point, because you would give two different sets of members some advice around food intake, and some would still gain weight and while others wouldn't. And it was always that question of, okay, what's genetics playing a role? How is muscle mass playing a role? But even when I started to discover some of this information, when I got more information about muscle mass and metabolism, the equation still wasn't quite right. And I just thought there has to be something else. And I always thought to myself, it just feels like some people are absorbing calories more readily than others. And it was just so great to hear this information, because I know that when I'm working with people, often there will be people that I come across that would just say to me, Snez, I just look at food and I'm gaining weight. And I remember thinking, no, well, you can't just be looking at food. And I know that's just a metaphor for what is actually happening. But I always felt like, well, maybe your portions aren't, and this is still part of the equation, but I always felt maybe the portions are bigger than what they really expect, or visually what they think they should be consuming. They're obviously moving less, or there's less muscle mass, and there was always these other contributing factors that I was trying to help people to find, whereas that was not something that I would ever say about myself. I always felt that I could have, within reason, I'm a very healthy eater, but if I did have ice cream or fish and chips on the beach, like, it wouldn't really stick. Like, it would, I'd process it and it would kind of go on. And it was really great to get this information, because now we've got some more clues about the benefits of gut health, not only just towards mental health, but the way that we're absorbing food and the weight gain that comes as a result. Whereas if we go to bacteroidetes, they're associated with leanness. They're less efficient at calorie extraction from the food that you're consuming, so you absorb fewer calories and are less likely to gain weight. And studies have shown that people with a higher body fat and higher BMI tend to have a higher ratio of firmicutes to bacteroidetes. And in fact, the firmicutes and bacteroidetes ratio is often used as a marker for obesity. And my question is, how come we haven't heard about this before? And I do come across a lot of information. It was just nothing I'd heard before. And I thought this absolutely needs to be shared. Now, why does this happen? So the reason that firmicutes promote weight gain is that they're better at breaking down complex carbohydrates and fibers into short chain fatty acids, which are then absorbed as extra calories in your body. So if your gut is dominated by firmicutes, you get more energy out of every bite of food, which can lead to weight gain, even if you're not eating more than someone else that has less firmicutes and eating the same food, which is just a fantastic piece of the puzzle to unpack and to understand. Whereas bacteroidetes, on the other hand, are less efficient at this process, so you absorb fewer calories and are less likely to store fat. And the thing is that as we get older, both in men and women, and with our hormonal shifts, that balance of gut bacteria actually changes, especially women in the menopausal years. And this often means an increase in firmicutes and a decrease in bacteroidetes, which can make weight gain around the waist, around the belly, around that middle, more likely. And this is why so many people, and you've probably said this yourself, that like, I'm not eating any more or any different, but I'm gaining weight. And up until this point in time, a lot of the reason that I felt caused that was a reduction in metabolism due to a loss in muscle mass, which naturally occurs as we age, which is still very accurate. But we've got this other level now that we can understand and work with to change, which is just fantastic. So it's not just in our head that weight loss becomes harder or weight gain just suddenly starts to appear with no real change to your food intake. It is actually happening, and it's your gut bacteria playing a big role. So what can we actually do? And the good news is that you can influence your gut bacteria and your weight through your lifestyle choices, the types of foods that you're eating and what you're actually doing. And if we go back to the good and bad bacteria, it makes so much sense because we know that good bacteria loves fiber, it creates alkalinity in our system, it helps with the digestion and uptake of nutrients in our food, whereas bad bacteria, or the firmicutes, are more processing sugars, and they thrive on sugar because that's their role. This is what feeds them, and that's really interesting. So the more sugar we're putting into our system, the more we're going to develop a greater colony of firmicutes in our gut, which basically means that we get more cravings for sugar, because if you've got a larger population of firmicutes, guess what? They want more carbohydrate to eat and to break down, and in that process they're storing more. So you can see how that creates such a cycle of consuming higher carbohydrate foods, absorbing more calories, which leads to weight gain. But the good news is that we can influence it, we can shift it. So what are the first thing that I'd suggest, and some of the recommendations are that you actually eat more fiber. So diets that are higher in fiber, so those that are rich in vegetables, in fruits, in nuts, and in whole grains, support bacteroidetes, the lean bacteria. So the reason being is because that's their source of fuel. So our healthy gut bacteria increases the amount of good bacteria or bacteroidetes in our system. And remembering when we increase the population of bacteroidetes in our gut, it creates an alkaline system and an environment where firmicutes or bad bacteria don't thrive as well. So it really helps with the balance. So when we're have a diet of predominantly processed foods or foods high in sugar and fat, they tend to feed the firmicutes or the bad bacteria, or we could not even call them bad bacteria anymore. I'm leaning into calling them more the weight gain bacteria. So that's definitely something that we want to get into, eating more whole foods that are rich in vegetables, fruits, nuts, and whole grains that can support that lean bacteria. I started chatting to you about bacteroidetes and firmicutes, good and bad bacteria in our gut, but in particular, some new information about the impact of this bacteria on our weight gain. And we're just looking at, well, how do we actually improve our gut health and increase the amount of bacteroides in our system? So we've gone through eating more fibre as a way to build up our good bacteria or our bacteroides. But the second way is resistance training. And this is where it gets really exciting, because resistance training or lifting weights using resistance bands or even body weight exercises, it doesn't just build muscle, but it also improves your gut health in a couple of different ways. So the first way is that it reduces inflammation in your body. So exercise, but in particular resistance training, has been shown to lower inflammation in the body. Now, when we have less inflammation in the body, it helps to create a healthier environment for the beneficial bacteria to thrive, which is really important. It's not just about adding probiotics and eating probiotic foods, but putting it into a system that isn't going to allow that bacteria to grow and thrive. So we want to create an environment in our whole body that is going to allow that good bacteria to continue to thrive, regenerate, and help us with all the benefits of good gut health. So the other thing that resistance training does is it has been shown to increase the diversity of gut bacteria, including boosting the bacteroides, but also reducing the firmicutes. And it also, by building muscle, you increase your resting metabolic rate, which basically means you're going to be burning more calories, and the improved gut bacteria can further support a healthier weight. So you've got two things happening alongside of each other when we add resistance training in, is that not only is it going to support the good bacteria to thrive, but it's also going to use up more of our energy and our calories that then the firmicutes aren't having to process and deal with. So it is a real double benefit there in terms of resistance training. And I absolutely loved when I read that information, because I am a big advocate of strength training, and to just get more and more benefits lining up by doing strength training is just fantastic and absolutely wonderful to share that information. So the next thing, though, that we can do, and we'll get back to resistance training in a sec, but the next thing that we can do is make sure that we have variety in not only in our diet and also in our exercise routine. So what we find is that the more diverse your gut microbiome becomes, it's linked to even better health and easier weight management. So when we're talking about varying your diet, we want to make sure that we're getting a range of nutrients and a range of different fibers, because we know that we don't just have one strain of gut bacteria. Even amongst the bacteroides that are our healthy, good bacteria, we know we have different types of bacteria. So, and they'll feed on different types of fibers and work in different ways. So we need to make sure that we're getting a range of colours in our vegetables, a range of nuts and seeds, and good healthy foods full of fibre. Then the other thing is also different types of exercise help us to impact our gut bacteria in a variety of different ways. So varying that up and making sure that if you are just doing walking, then make sure that you do include some resistance training. Or if you are just doing resistance training only, make sure that you go out there and get that balance with the cardio, or whether it be some quick short bursts of exercise, whatever works well for you. But having that variation in our training and in the type of activity that we're doing. And it doesn't even need to be scheduled training. It could be going for a walk one day and then maybe doing some heavy lifting around the garden. So just working in different ways. And it makes sense if we think about it, because basically the more diverse the experiences, the range of activity, the different energy needs, the different ability for the body to digest foods, the more varied and the more resilient our body will become. So definitely making sure we're getting variety, but also consistency, that we need to make sure that we are getting enough fibre in regularly into our day to consistently develop this healthy gut bacteria. Now, why does all this matter? So this is new and exciting information for many of us, and it matters because it can be a piece of the puzzle of weight loss and weight gain as well, to help us in that way, because it can be quite a challenge and we can struggle for a long time to try and achieve a healthier weight. So I always felt that, as I mentioned at the start, that weight didn't quite stick to me the way it did for others. And I started to notice that people that were weight training did have a healthier diet, that leaned more heavily towards the whole foods and the fibre through fruit and veg and nuts and seeds. I did find that there was always a difference in terms of the way that they lost weight, but also the way that their bodies responded when they went on holiday. I just found that the weight gain from eating irregular meals and eating out more and indulging a little bit more when we're away was always a lot less in active people. But even people that were quite heavily affected by that before they got started with strength training, I found that when they went to holidays later on after doing 6 months of training or 3 months or 12 months of training, they always found that they actually didn't get the weight gain that they normally would, even though they were eating the similar things and indulging in similar ways. So it is really quite an exciting bit of information. And now there's a scientific reason for it. We just know that we need to balance out that gut bacteria. And as we get older, for both men and women, and also through menopause, understanding and supporting our gut health becomes really quite important. So the tips are to make sure that we're focusing on whole fibre-rich foods, limiting our processed foods, but in particular sugar. Add resistance training to your day at least 2 or 3 times a week. Now, remembering that's not me promoting go to a gym 2 to 3 times a week, because I know that's not for everyone, but we can all do some basic strengthening exercises, even at home with limited equipment. Just start to ask the questions, get some help, Google online, reach out to me. I will definitely support you. But you can mix up your workouts as well. Make sure that you are getting variety in your training as well as in your meals and in the range and diversity of foods that you are eating. But by making these changes, you are going to notice not only a change in your weight, you will start to shift weight that potentially has been quite stubborn in the past, but you're also going to find that if you do have an off day or you indulge in any way, you will find that you won't feel as bloated and the impact won't be as great. Thanks for joining me on this segment from Wellbeing Wednesdays, as heard live on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who might find it helpful and subscribe so you never miss a show. Want to catch the live broadcast? Well, you can tune in Wednesdays from 12 till 2 p.m. on 88.6 Plenty Valley FM, or find my info on Wellbeing Wednesdays with Snez, the Facebook group. Take care, stay healthy, and remember, it's the little choices every day that create big changes. Talk soon.